When John Wick 4 was released, they came out with a series of pistols, one being the Pit Viper and this one, the Sand Viper. In this video, I review the Taran Tactical Sand Viper. Now, every time a John Wick video comes out, there is a demand for the pistol that he's shooting. Now, in John Wick 4, they came out with the Pit Viper, and you're probably wondering, well, wait a minute, what about the Sand Viper? What is the story with this? So when they were working on John Wick 4, they had to keep delaying the release of the video. Now, the challenge with that is when you are a business and you have $1 million of sitting inventory, these guns right here, you have to figure out how to do something in the meanwhile until you can recognize that. And so the idea is that they would release the Pit Viper when John Wick 4 came out. So what they decided to do, since they were unfinished, is that they took a handful of them and came up with this copper look here and made them optics only and came out with the Sand Viper. What I already found interesting as I was doing research on these is that these tend to hold the same value as the actual Pit Vipers that you see on the internet. Now, what's funny is every time a John Wick movie comes out, you can expect an increase in demand for these, and it always reflects in the guns when you see them online. In fact, when I was looking, I only saw 2 of these for sale that were used, and they wanted $8 grand a piece for them. So there is quite a bit of demand for these still. And I'm gonna get into the tabletop review of this now. I really wanna thank my friend Calvin. He is the one that let me borrow this and let me shoot it in matches, and as well as this Pit Viper. So he's an awesome dude. Definitely if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, visit OMG Tacos, so you gotta check him out. All right, so here we are with the close-up of the Sand Viper. And so it's chambered in 9mm. I don't currently see any other options, and it does have a compensator which also doubles as a sight block, as you'll see here when I rack it back. Now, if you're wondering too that these things have fangs, well, I'm gonna lock it right here for you and show you that these little points on the end here is, I guess if you were in a fight, you rack this gun back, and these are your little fangs. And so if you're ever wondering what they're referring to in the actual John Wick movie as fangs, that's it. Now, as you're working it through this, when you actually get this in your hands or even see it from afar, it does leave the right first impressions. I mean, this thing is absolutely a beautiful gun. The fit and finish is absolutely on point with what you would expect in a gun on this price range. You know, there's just a little wiggle back here on the slide, but I expect that. That's kind of normal. But the finish right here, if you get really close to it, it is absolutely solid. And you can tell there's a ton of machine work that has gone into this gun to get it where it's at. And everything from the laser etching of actual Taran Tactical to the Sand Viper portion is in here. And a lot of these guns, when you're paying this price range, it's all in the details as you start to look closer to it. Now, one thing I want to kind of point out is the serrations. I would have preferred that they had actually extended it on this front part, because that's actually where I like to rack it. That's more of a preference thing, but being up here, they're more than effective. As you start to look at other details with this gun, one thing I'll kind of point out is the finish back here on this. Well, when guns are in their raw format, what distinguishes a gun from maybe a $2,000 to a $5,000 plus gun is how they do these little details of finishing here. And so just even touching on this, I know Aftech, which is the extractor for this, is actually a different maker, but you can even tell that they took the time to actually flush mount that to the back of the slide. And as you work your way through here, you want to kind of just run your finger through here, and everything is just perfectly flush. Now, another detail that's pointed out a lot of times on these higher end guns is that when you actually lock in the grip safety, so you can push this down and you'll feel right in here that this is all perfectly blended. And this is where you start to see the details of a gun of this caliber, is just in how things are fit and finish. You know, and you kind of look at the alignment here, is that with the sight block comp here and the rest of the slide, it's flush all up and around through here. Those are the details you start to poke out on guns in this price range. One thing I did catch my attention was the style of the grip safety. I did have a challenge with this in some of the shooting because I would go to grip it, and because I like to kind of perch up like that, you know, if you notice I have just a little bit of natural spacing right there, which is why when you grab, let's say, a Staccato per se, they have that little extension on the end of it. And so when you hold it, even with a grip like mine, it actually pushes it down. I only had a challenge with that a couple of times, which is once on the Pit Viper and once on this gun when running a stage. But you know, that's kind of just something you got to pay attention to. It's not necessarily something that should take you back. You know, as far as the ergonomics of this particular gun, this gun fitted well in my hands. Everything about it is 2011 and will feel familiar with that if you're used to that type of gun, including the shape and all the contouring of everything going on here. Now, what I will point out that I like though is the actual stippling. This is all hand stippling, and it's done all the way around if you look throughout the grip itself, and it carries even on the underside of the trigger guard. Now, when that feels like in your hands, it is a very positive lock. It's not too aggressive, but it does do the job. Now, I know some of you are sitting there thinking like, wait a minute, this is a 7,000 MSRP ask. Why a polymer grip? Well, you can perceive that as probably something, and it may in fact be less to produce, but there is an advantage to having a polymer grip on a gun like this, and that is that it does absorb a little recoil, and it also just kind of distributes weight more upside through here. Now, I'll kind of touch on that in the shooting experience, but I would not let that necessarily hang up, and I know a lot of you may view it that way, but hey, that's just how it comes, and they do, but where they make up for that is in the time they take to actually do all this stippling. So it feels excellent in the hands, and the lock on it is where you would expect it with the 2011. So everything is going to feel familiar if you're on that 1911 and 2011 platform already, including everything from the slide stop and the way that the ambi safeties are oriented. And speaking of safeties, as you kind of flip them through, yeah, that's fit very well. A lot of times you can feel the fit when you're pulling it up and down. As number one, this doesn't have any wiggle with any inside of it, and the audible tactility, oh, that's actually really nice, is spot on. All right, so let's talk about the weight of this gun. So this is with a Trijicon SRO, and I'll just line it up right here for you, okay? And it comes in at just at 36 ounces, which is called at 36.5. Now, if you're deciding to shoot competition, this is actually an MBX mag made for IDPA 2011 type guns. So just put that in there. And we're sitting right at 40 ounces. So this would essentially be your competition weight, which if you're shooting IDPA carry optic, it would be 45 ounces. You're well within spec. And since we're on that subject, why don't we see, since we're on that subject, let's see if it fits in the box. So as you can see, this gun fits well within the box. A lot of these guns, when they were made, weren't made with IDPA in mind, so you would probably run multi-gun. You see a lot of slide ride optics in open, and in fact, I believe Zach Smith did pretty well in the two-gun nats with this gun. And that just kind of leaves the feeling of where is the weight bias on this? Well, anytime you get any of these 2011 type polymer gripped ones, all the weight tends to feel on the top side of your hands. What I'm happy to say is that even with the sight block comp up front and where the weight is positioned on this, a lot of the weight falls back in this area. Now, does that balance really hurt you in the shooting experience? Not necessarily. But you'll notice it if you're a fan of metal grips, that the weight then becomes in the hands versus being on top. And this review, and especially a gun at this price point, wouldn't be anything without a review of the trigger. And just walking you through the characteristic of it here, you're gonna come to a very minimal amount of pre-travel there, and this trigger shoe's metal. And so it feels nice in the hands, just enough beveling in there, and you get to that wall, breaks. And I'm gonna guess that this thing, before I get my my gauge on it, I think this is a sub 2 pound trigger, guys. And so the reset is immediate. So everything you would expect on this platform to have happen, it is. And so what is a 2011 review without gauging the trigger? Well, let's take a look. Ooh. Okay, 1 pound and 3/4. That is incredible. All right, so kind of just moving our way, like the actual sighting system. This is really the big difference between the Pit Viper and this gun, is that this gun is only currently made optic ready. Now, I think there were plans at some point to make the Pit Viper optic ready, as that's iron sight only last time I checked. But the Sand Viper as it is, and if you remember the actual backstory of this thing, you know, they got to differentiate it somehow from that gun. And so you will not have any, there will be no front sight, and there's not a co-witness option. Now the huge positive though is that because it's direct milled, this optic, especially the SRO, is literally sitting right on top of the slide. So the lower you get it, the less exaggeration you get in the dot. Now that's really important too, because as fast cycling as this gun is, you know, I couldn't imagine this gun having a really high optic, because it would be really hard to continually track that dot if you had a ton of exaggeration. But keeping it low and working with a really fast gun like this one is an ideal combination. Now, just briefly talking about the magazines that come with them, looks like they come with Atlas made magazines, and so these two right here are 22 rounders, and they're about the 140 millimeter USPSA mag size. I think they might be a tad big. This one right here is a 28 round, and you would run this actually like in an open gun setting. So this is a 170 millimeter mag, and yep, I ran it in competition, and it definitely reliable. You know, there's not that fable old tale where you have to tune mags with these things. These things came ready out of the box. Now, if you wanted to run IDPA, this is a compliant one, and this is the one that comes with the Sand Viper. If you see here, there's definitely a difference in size, okay? And if you'll notice that the base pad is angular, you would have to consider getting different magazines and base pads should you decide to actually seriously shoot this in competition for IDPA. And all right, let's just briefly touch on the Magwell. Well, this right here is interesting because you've got beveling in here, and it all matches up reasonably with what's going on in the grip. You know, just a little bit of protrusion in there, but I think that's intentional in design, because a lot of times your shouldering on the magazines can be a preventative stop there, because what's known on this platform to happen a lot of times is over insertion. And when you start to get over insertion of the mags, you start to damage the ejector. So that is, I believe that may be the intention of this design right here, is to shoulder it against that. But it's a good size Magwell, and I can tell you I had zero issues with reloads on these. And to give you an idea of the size of like a full competitive Magwell, you know, this is kind of the one on my Masterpiece Arms DS9, the limited optics model. And this is definitely more of the tactical size Magwell that you would get with this. But the pro of that is it gives you options, and you know, it would make it easier to carry. Now let's get into the shooting experience. Now before I do that, I want to ask that if you like this video, hit that like button, and you're going to want to subscribe, because I'm actually going to be doing a comparison against my Masterpiece Arms DS9 ported model and a Staccato XC, so you're going to want to subscribe. Now, from a person that shoots a lot and a competitive standpoint, this gun's characteristic can be summed up as one word: fast. Now, it's funny is that you can put this in the hands of someone that's less experienced, and they'll go out right away and start shooting pretty good, because the gun not only is fast to cycle, but it's so easy to shoot. I kid you not, when this gun would cycle, the return to zero was so quick that I had to kind of get my eyes adjusted to this, because I was like, oh man, I can actually push this gun a little harder than I think. And you'll see that in some of the stages I shoot, that I could really just lay into this gun's ability. You know, and transitions too were nice and smooth. I did talk about the balance being more on the top side, but once you start shooting it and you get in there with your grip and get locked in, you know, the gun's weight is actually what makes this gun nice and easy to use. Going in between targets literally felt like cheating. This is what happens when you get a gun with ideal weight and ergonomics, as well as it's meant to be shot quick. And what's really cool too is, yeah, you could absolutely be competitive with this gun. And I touched on that earlier, that one of the Taran Tactical shooters ended up winning the 2-gun championship with this pistol right here. So this gun is built to run out of the box. When I run these higher end guns and when you have tighter tolerances, I always get a leery of the reliability. Sometimes guns can be kind of picky with ammo, weather, and my first shots that I took at the range with this was in 29-degree weather, and this gun cycled just fine. I ended up putting all sorts of ammo through it, including plus P ammo, Blazer 115, and 124 and 147. It would cycle all of them. Now, I will tell you, since you have the comp on this gun, that it really liked 115, and as well as the plus P. Even with plus P, although you might feel a little bit more in the hands, the gun just returned to zero, I would say even quicker than the Blazer 115 that I was running through it. I would say this gun's for 3 different people out there. There's gonna be that guy that's a collector that says, hey, I just wanted something of not only good taste, but something that's in a movie that I liked a lot, which is John Wick 4. That's who this is for. And there is an appreciable aspect, as sometimes you can see that they sell for one thing and sell for a little bit more later, especially every time they come out with a new one. And funny enough, I also think this could be for the serious IDPA gamer. Well, I say that because we're all now starting to run Staccato XCs, my MPAs included in that mix. This gun as is, you slap an optic on it and you could actually be very, very competitive with this gun. You also could run this in the multi-gun facet in the open division, and that's where I would say that this gun would be for. If you're looking for an actual race gun, this is definitely there. And finally, the third guy, right? This one is really genuinely for the guy that wants to go shoot and shoot a lot. Because not only will this gun impress you, impress your friends, and make you want to spend a lot of money in ammo because it's so dang fun to shoot, but it's going to be up for the task. It's not going to be finicky, and it's just going to keep running through. And so with that said, guys, if you get up one of these, invite me out because I want to see you at the range.